with all new red line columns. Please stand back to the left.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a summer reading vlog. Moments I've been capturing this summer that, honestly, I think selfishly, I just want to document them for myself. A little bit of a video journal that I can look back on in 10 years and be like, hey, that was the day that I went to the Brattle Bookshop in Boston and walked around afterwards, and it was just the most beautiful time ever. So unfortunately, the copy of Count of Monte Cristo that I found is an abridged version, and if I was smarter, I probably would have noticed that a lot sooner before I bought it, because it is so much smaller and less thick than the other copies of Count of Monte Cristo I've seen. Brattle Bookstore had a new copy that was $14, and my local used bookstore had two copies that were used, but they both had like weird brown stains on them, and like I feel like I have a pretty high tolerance for used books, but brown stains are kind of suspicious. So the hunt for a used copy of Count of Monte Cristo continues. In the meantime, I have an ebook, but yeah, I'm a little disappointed in myself for not noticing sooner. Those clips were from a couple weeks ago when the World Cup was still in its beginning stages. I think it was still in the group stages, or maybe it was a knockout at that point. But yeah, hey, World Cup. Who would have thought that I would get into that? But it's been really fun to learn about the narratives of it all. Like watching the Cabo Verde game against Argentina, that was an epic in and of itself. That was a whole novel in 100+ minutes. That was incredible. I'm excited for the final tomorrow. I'm in the bathroom right now, but this place is huge and amazing. And look at how beautiful. This place was really big physically, but their book selection was actually not that much bigger. In fact, I think it was much smaller than my normal used bookstore that I go to that's closer to me. Grey Matter Books, still undefeated, still the goated bookstore in Western Mass, in my opinion, but this place was pretty good. I will say they were also more expensive than Grey Matter Books. Not to pit two queens against each other, but this place was more expensive. This copy of Madame Bovary, gorgeous, we love, but it was $6. And at Grey Matter Books, it would be $3. But not mad at it. I really like this cover. I also got Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and I only got one other book, The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. just finished The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen, and I was surprised with how much I fell in love with this book. The first 25%, I feel like Franzen really tries to get you to hate these characters. He really starts out with their most unflattering versions of each of these people. This book is a portrait of a highly dysfunctional family. It's about this Midwestern family. Alfred and Enid are the parents. Enid. They live in this town called St. Jude, which is maybe a little bit on the nose. St. Jude being the patron saint of the lost causes, but Enid has this desire for all of her kids, Gary, Chip, and Denise, to come together to St. Jude for one last family Christmas. That's kind of the refrain of this book, is one last family Christmas. Because Alfred, the father, is sick. He has Parkinson's. And so there is this, there's like a lot of emotional stuff happening in this book. And Alfred himself is kind of this complicated character. He's aloof, and all of his kids have different relationships with him. Enid is overbearing as a mother, and at the same time, I feel like Franzen does a lot to respect and highlight the domestic and emotional labor that Enid does. You're hopping around each family member and you're learning about these things that they did back in the day, and there's almost like this feeling that each of these characters would like to think that they are independent actors in the world, but they don't realize the domino effects of everything that they do and how that affects their family. And I think it's like really charting that domino effect. By the end, I was surprised with how much I fell in love with this family, and there are characters here that I think are just irredeemable. I still don't like them even at the end of this book. The heart of this book, I feel like, was there, and it was a lot less cynical than I thought it would be, which is surprising. This book came out in 2000, and I was a little bit wary going into it because I had heard that Franzen was like a really dude bro author, so I was really surprised pleasantly by the dimensionality and the way that he portrayed Denise and Enid. I was really worried about Denise specifically, the way that the language he uses to describe Denise early on. I couldn't tell if it was intentionally from the like indirect perspective of the character he was following, Chip, or if it was just how he was writing her, if that makes sense. Like, there are elements to this book where it's like the framing is important. Does that make any sense? But anyways, Denise ended up being my favorite character of this book, and so 75% of the way through, this book really clicked for me, and it went from being a book that I was just reading to a story that I was invested in. I will say, because the first 25% of this book is so miserable, and the characters are so unlikable, I don't know that I would have been able to read this in the winter. I think I would have just DNF'd it, but because it's summer and because my vibes are so buoyant, nothing can bring them down, I was like, I can take on this book. And I'm glad I stuck with it, because I ended up, it wasn't heartwarming, but it was like it was hopeful in the end. I would read more stuff by Jonathan Franzen, and I'm glad that I picked this book up, because I've heard things about Franzen, but this is just confirming to me that I need to make up my own mind about things, because sometimes the discourse is off the mark and flattens certain aspects of authors in a way that I think does them a disservice. So I like this book. I would recommend it as a summer read, especially if you're into dysfunctional families. Like, I think you would like this book. If you like Succession, I think you would like this book. Also, what I'm currently reading is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I have this copy, which if you just saw the clips from the vlog, is not the copy that I got at Commonwealth Books, but I ended up getting this really nasty copy because it was $3. I also bought a new copy from Harvard Books, so now I own 3 Count of Monte Cristos. This book is wildly entertaining. It is the perfect summer read. It does feel to me like it scratches that same itch of like reading or watching like a comic book cartoon where he's just going on these various adventures at this point, kind of episodic a little bit now. I'm really glad I bought into the hype on this book because it's entertaining. I don't think it's going to be my favorite book of all time, but I'm liking it a lot. And speaking of Alexandre Dumas, I went on a trip recently to Canada for a dear friend's wedding. I was friends with both the bride and groom, so it was like a double whammy of joy, and it was just like the most fun wedding I've ever been to. A bunch of my friends were there, and it was the best. We danced, we laughed, we crowed. We had so much fun. While we were there, I did buy some books. I've been buying a lot of books this summer in general, but I wanted to share these Canada books because they're special. So I got this copy of not The Count, but The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. And I haven't seen The Three Musketeers. I keep seeing the second book in the series, The Man in the Iron Mask, but I haven't seen this one. So I was really happy that I came across this and I swooped it. Count as anything to go off of. This is going to be a wild ride. By the way, I got this at Macleod's Books in Vancouver. The other books I got at Macleod's were this book called The Elementals by Morgan Llewellyn. This one I feel like is kind of giving camp, but anytime I come across a book that's written by a woman and it's like a fantasy book, I will just always buy it. This one's like water, fire, earth, air, things that are being impacted by climate change. So it's like water is Atlantis and air is the ozone. I'm actually very intrigued by this. I got this copy of The House of Spirits by Isabel Allende. I recently just got another copy of Eva Luna by Isabel Allende, and it's the same art style, so I wanted to have like a little set of both Eva Luna and The House of Spirits. Final book I got at Macleod's was this gorgeous copy of Jane Eyre, which obviously I already own. It's one of my favorite books of all time, but I really loved this cover. You can never have too many copies of a book you love. Macleod's, by the way, I just want to paint a portrait of what it looks like. You walk in and it's dusty and there are just stacks and stacks of books, and like there are books on the floor. There's like boxes of books. There's boxes labeled weird things. It's a real labyrinth of books. You can also stop at the Paper Hound, which is very nearby, and it's a little bit more organized and less chaotic, and they have a great selection of new and used books.
Is
that Jimi Hendrix? Oh, it is Jimi Hendrix. So I got this copy of 1984 by George Orwell. I read this in high school. The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck. I did not read this in high school. I know a lot of people have to, especially in California. But I just didn't have to read this in high school. I do want to read it though, because I feel like The Grapes of Wrath is so intertwined with like American literature, a very influential book, so I want to get to this at some point. So the Paper Hound was a new and used bookstore, and they had this new copy of Nazi Literature in the Americas by Roberto Bolaño, so I had to pick this up. They also had another one by him. I forget what it was called, but it was blue. I kind of wish I had just gotten it now, because that would have been nice to have. So I was trying to be responsible or whatever and not buy too many books, but yeah, I have a bunch of Bolaño, and obviously 2666 was the best book I read last year. This is a lot shorter than that behemoth. The most exciting thing about the Paper Hound, I will say, was that they had individual issues of the Paris Review and N+1. I have heard of these publications. I was just curious about these two publications because I've heard about them a lot, but they are expensive to subscribe to, and I don't normally see individual issues for sale, so I had to take advantage of that. Excited to go through this and see what they offer. Hopefully I don't enjoy it too much and don't feel the urge to subscribe. I love the little advertisement for the New York Review of Books on the back. And there's another advertisement on this for Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. I feel like every time I see a book that's published by them, it's about to be a banger. I'm so excited. There is going to be a showing of the Mary Oliver documentary at the local cinema, and last night I decided to read a bunch of her poems. Obviously I'm familiar with Wild Geese, but I was just really struck by how accessible her poetry is. Like, it's not elusive at all. It's not dense. It's very simple, and she asks these very simple questions, and it's rooted in nature and animals. Like, she loves animals so much, and she really sees the divine in nature. And so it's just like, yeah, I really loved this poetry collection. I didn't read all of them, obviously. I think I read all of the ones from Felicity and Blue Horses. Actually, I think Blue Horses is my favorite poem of hers. It's about her stepping into a work of art, quite literally, that, like, she says, I step into the 4 blue horses. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous poem. It made me cry. I was reading these out loud to myself last night and crying. I wasn't expecting to feel so moved by this documentary. I wasn't expecting to just weep openly at the story of Mary Oliver's life. Yeah, I feel like I learned so much about life, about being a creative. I really, really recommend, if you are someone who wants to make art, talk about art, I recommend watching this documentary because it was just really, really lovely. I don't have the words to talk about it right now. I feel really full emotionally, and I do feel like I learned so much. And I really liked the documentary itself. I felt like it did such a wonderful job of seamlessly weaving through the biographical parts of her life, you know, talking about her early life and her partner, and touching on these various subjects of the criticism of her poetry, and like the fact that she didn't even really get her big break until she was 40. That in and of itself is such a huge lesson. And just her poetry. I think everyone should read her poetry. She is so popular. And they talk about that. They talk about the tension of her being popular and the critics. And there's a line in it from Ada Limon, and she talks about how sometimes when you win the people, you lose the poets. I feel not so self-conscious about loving Mary Oliver, even though she is so popular. I think they said she was the best-selling poet in America. The inclusion of Stephen Colbert and Oprah took me out a little bit, but at the same time, I felt like they had a genuine appreciation for her work. And if you need famous people to get a documentary filmed and produced, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world that they were part of the movie. It was just a little jarring, but glad that I fought to actually watch it, because I tried watching it on Saturday and it was sold out. So I think I got the last ticket. Very lucky that I got to catch it in the theaters. And yeah, when it comes out on streaming, I would definitely recommend it.